Want to thank you for joining us today. This is actually a good place to do a press conference, and certainly you want to do one to talk about what it means to be able to live and survive with those creatures that make this planet possible. So we want to thank you for being here. Let me begin by recognizing the people who are standing with me. Megan Hurdle with the Audubon Society will speak after I say some words. And I'd like to introduce the members of my team at the Department of Justice who really did the work to put this action we're announcing today together. Some of the folks who aren't here, but I want to recognize Sally McNaughty, who is our Senior Assistant Attorney General, David Zadona, Supervising Deputy Attorney General. Both are not here. George Torgan is here, and he is able to answer questions that may go beyond what I can tell you. Aaron Ganal is also here. Both are Deputy Attorney Generals and can answer questions. Tara Mueller is not here, another deputy who has worked on this matter. And Arsenio Mataka, who is the Special Assistant on Environmental Issues for me at the Department of Justice. They are all here. Arsenio as well could answer questions. I want to say thank you for joining us here during Climate Week. And we're having pretty good climate right now here in Sacramento. It's a week where everyone's supposed to focus on the environment and, quite honestly, what we do to prioritize new solutions to deal with global climate change. And obviously, a lot of countries, a lot of communities are taking on the challenge. My suspicion is that the Trump administration has misread the Endangered Species Act that we're here to talk about. The Endangered Species Act, we all understand what that means. We're trying to save, protect endangered species. My sense is they've chosen to prioritize endangering endangered species rather than protecting those species. Either that or their recent actions simply show that they are continuing their lawless behavior. For over 45 years, the Endangered Species Act has protected thousands of species that are endangered or are threatened, whether it's the grizzly bear, the humpback whale, the California condor, or the bald eagle. We all know about these various animals and species that are out there, the creatures of this world that are important to us. The animals that we're talking about, take the bald eagle. It's just not a symbol of this country. The grizzly bear is just not a symbol of this country. They are key parts of our ecosystem. And these ecosystems are facing unprecedented threat in the form of our climate crisis, habitat loss, and a myriad other threats. In fact, in a recent report issued by the United Nations, we learned that 1 million of the Earth species are under threat. And just last week, we learned that North America has lost 3 billion birds in the last 50 years. Now is the time to strengthen our planet's biodiversity, not to destroy it. But instead of choosing to protect these species, the Trump administration has decided to backslide on long-standing regulatory protections implementing the Endangered Species Act. That rollback removes current provisions that help prevent threatened species from becoming endangered or extinct, and provisions that help endangered species recover. That's something that's overriding within the Endangered Species Act. It's one of the main purposes of that act. It's not just to protect, it's to help species recover. Key among those provisions in the Endangered Species Act is one that bans the capture, killing, or destruction of a particular species. The rollback also puts newly listed threatened species at risk, getting them caught in a web of red tape as the Fish and Wildlife Service determines whether to develop individualized rules for every single threatened plant or animal. In California alone, that's 35 animals and 98 plant species alone, sitting on the chopping block for months or even years, while their plans may or may not be developed. I don't think any of us wants a museum to be the only place that these children will be able to see the southern sea otter or the desert tortoise. But if we don't act, that's a real possibility. Those species are categorized as threatened based on science and data. But the administration's rules throw science and data out the window by injecting economic considerations into what should be a science-driven decision. Whether or not an animal should be protected should not be a question of whether or not it will help or impede corporate profits. The Endangered Species Act directs that protections of imperiled species take precedence over corporate profits. The law is clear. It is the responsibility of the federal government to make sure that actions will not jeopardize the survival of species or degrade critical habitat. This isn't the first time this administration has abdicated its role to protect our planet, life, and wildlife. Last year, the Trump administration issued guidance to weaken protections for America's migratory birds, and we filed a lawsuit challenging them at that point. And that's why today we are announcing that we are taking legal action against the Trump administration once more, this time to protect the Endangered Species Act and the plants and the animals that depend on it. Because the future health of our planet depends on all those creatures. Our lawsuit, co-led by Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosh and Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, brings together 17 state attorneys general, the District of Columbia, and the City of New York, who are ready to stand up for our environment. We don't challenge these actions because we want to pick a fight. We challenge these actions because it is necessary. We're coming out swinging to defend this consequential law. Humankind and the species with whom we share this planet depend on it. Let me now turn to Megan Hurdle from the Audubon Society for her comments.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to put you in the sun over there. Hang in. Good morning. My name is Megan Hurdle. I'm the Director of Land and Water Conservation with Audubon, California. And first, I'd like to start by thanking the Attorney General and his staff for their leadership on this issue and on many other environmental issues facing California today. Second, I just want to say thank you for allowing Audubon to be here to share our perspective on this issue. Obviously, it's incredibly important to us. You heard the Attorney General reference many birds that are impacted by this. California has the highest biodiversity of any state in the country. We also have the most endangered and threatened species. A few of the iconic California birds that are currently protected by the Federal Endangered Species Act include the California condor, the snowy plover, and the California gnatcatcher. All of these species and many others are at greater risk because of the Trump administration's new policies. And that's unfortunate because what we've learned over the decades is that the Endangered Species Act works. California is still home to incredible birds like the brown pelican, the peregrine falcon, and of course, the bald eagle. And that's because the Endangered Species Act brought these birds back from risk of extinction. And we know that we need the Endangered Species Act now more than ever. You heard the Attorney General reference something that's been in the news over the last week, and that is the fact that a recent study showed that we've lost 30% of our birds since 1970. That's in one lifetime, we've lost 3 billion birds. And the UN is actually calling it a global biodiversity crisis because we are losing these species at such an alarming rate. And as we look at climate change, we know that there's going to be more pressure put on species, and we have to be able to respond. At Audubon, we do not take the Endangered Species Act lightly. We work with many partners to the fullest extent possible to make sure that we have healthy populations of birds and other wildlife that never need these protections. But unfortunately, there are some species that the Endangered Species Act is their last best hope from extinction. So with this lawsuit, California is once again demonstrating its leadership on environmental issues and protecting vulnerable species. And also, we are showing that we are willing to stand up to bad federal policies that are not based on science, frankly, that lack common sense, and that are not sustainable. And we're here to work with the Attorney General, the state of California, to make sure that these federal policies stay where they need to be to protect birds and people, and also that the state has strong policies here in California to backstop any federal laws that are weakened. So I'm proud to be here today, standing with the Attorney General, his staff, and the state of California to ensure that we've got policies that work, that provide a resilient California now and for future generations, both for people and wildlife. Thank you.
Megan, thank you very much, and to all the members of the Audubon Society for what you have done over the years, over the decades, to really preserve what we cherish about this planet and Mother Nature.